Why did the black maid scream in a billionaire's mansion on a peaceful morning when everything looked perfect from the outside, but danger was quietly moving in the shadows waiting to explode? Naomi Brooks wiped the last glass in the grand dining hall as sunlight poured through tall windows, and she stayed silent like she always did, but her sharp eyes noticed things others ignored, like the bitterness in Vivienne King's stare or the tension that floated in the air every time Alexander King entered a room. Naomi walked toward the kitchen with calm steps, but her heart felt uneasy because her intuition told her that something terrible was close, and she had learned long ago that her instincts were never wrong. Vivienne King entered the room with her usual cold grace and looked Naomi up and down with that familiar judgment, the kind that said, "You are beneath me," without speaking a single word, and Naomi lowered her eyes not out of fear, but out of wisdom, because she had learned that silence was sometimes the strongest shield. Vivienne placed a cup on the counter, asking Naomi to take it to Alexander in his office, and her voice was smooth like honey, but her eyes were sharp like knives, and Naomi felt a strange chill run down her spine. She lifted the cup, and for a moment her nose caught a faint smell that did not belong to tea or coffee, and her heart skipped a beat, because she knew the scent too well from the hospital where her mother once worked as a cleaner. Naomi walked slowly through the hallway, her hands trembling slightly as she replayed Vivienne's fake smile over and over in her mind, and her fear grew with each step because she understood what might be inside that cup. She reached the office door and saw Alexander inside signing papers, unaware that danger was inches away from his lips, and the house staff watched from a distance, whispering with judgment, because they always believed Naomi was overly dramatic just because she was black and quiet. Alexander reached for the cup without looking up, and Naomi felt her chest tighten as she realized she only had 1 second to make a choice: save her own safety or save a man who barely noticed she existed, and in that moment, something powerful rose inside her. Naomi took a deep breath and screamed with everything inside her, saying, "Don't drink it," while her voice echoed through the mansion, and everyone froze, because a maid had never raised her voice before, and her scream carried truth, fear, and courage all at once. And if you want to hear what Alexander found inside that cup, and how that single scream destroyed a marriage forever, then stay with the story and make sure you subscribe, because the truth that comes next will change everything. Naomi Brooks stood frozen as the echoes of her scream faded through the grand dining hall, and Alexander King stared at her with wide, confused eyes, while the cup trembled in his hand, and Vivienne King's painted smile stiffened into something sharp and dangerous, and the house staff peeked from the hallway, trying to understand why the quiet black maid dared to raise her voice in a mansion where silence was expected from people like her, and Naomi felt her heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. Yet she forced her voice to stay steady as she whispered, "Sir, please do not drink that," and Alexander blinked slowly, struggling to process the sudden fear in her tone, while Vivienne stepped closer, tilting her head with a rehearsed softness as she asked Naomi why she was disrupting dinner again, and Naomi's stomach twisted because she knew the way Vivienne said again was meant to make her look unstable and dramatic when all she had done was save a life, and the staff exchanged nervous glances because they had seen this pattern before when someone lower dared to challenge someone higher, and the air in the room thickened with quiet racism that danced behind polished chandeliers and whispered from old portraits on the wall, and Alexander finally lowered the cup, asking Naomi calmly what was wrong, and Naomi pointed to the faint grainy residue on the rim, something she noticed only because she cleaned the cups daily and knew this one did not look like the others, and Vivienne's eyes flashed with annoyance as she quickly claimed it was just new vitamins she ordered for his stress, and Naomi swallowed hard, fighting the tremble in her voice, as she said, "No, ma'am, this powder is darker than any supplement I have seen," and the room shifted, because no maid was supposed to argue with the lady of the house, and Alexander turned the cup toward the light, seeing the residue for the first time, and his expression softened not with anger, but with disappointment as he murmured, "Vivienne, why didn't you mention this new formula?" And Vivienne forced a laugh, pretending this was all a misunderstanding, as she reached out to take the cup from him, but Naomi stepped forward faster, trembling, but determined, and said, "Please, so let me test it first, please," and her bravery shocked even herself, and the staff waited breathlessly, because everyone knew Vivienne was not used to being questioned, and Alexander nodded slowly, handing the cup to Naomi, and Vivienne's jaw tightened as Naomi carried it to the kitchen, feeling the weight of truth resting her shoulders, and she whispered a silent prayer that whatever was in that cup would reveal the darkness she had sensed for weeks, and as the kitchen door closed behind her, she knew this moment would change everything, and she knew viewers of this story would not want to miss what comes next. So she whispered softly to all who would hear, "If you want justice to be seen, please subscribe and stay until the truth finally rises." Naomi Brooks carefully examined the suspicious residue in the cup under the bright kitchen light. Her fingers steady despite the adrenaline racing through her veins and the weight of responsibility pressing on her chest, and she knew she had to act quickly because one wrong second could cost Alexander everything, and the thought of Vivienne's calm but poisonous smile haunted her memory as she prepared to reveal the truth, and she whispered softly to herself, "This is for justice and for everyone underestimated and ignored," and then she called Alexander, who arrived within minutes. Worry on his face deepening as he saw Naomi holding the cup and the fear in her eyes, and he immediately realized that she had caught something serious, and Naomi explained carefully what she noticed, and how it differed from the supplements Vivienne had claimed, and Alexander's brow furrowed, as the gravity of the situation sank in, and he could not believe that someone so close to him would try to harm him, and the irony struck him painfully, because he had always trusted Vivienne completely, and Naomi's quiet dignity and courage shone in the room like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, and Alexander felt a mixture of gratitude and shame as he looked at her, and Vivienne entered suddenly, pretending concern, but her eyes betrayed rage as she demanded to know why Naomi was interfering, and Alexander finally raised his voice calmly but firmly enough to stop her arrogance in its tracks, and said, "That is enough, Vivienne. I trust Naomi on this," and she froze like a statue, realizing for the first time that her manipulation was unraveling, and Naomi stayed calm, holding the cup carefully as she explained that had Alexander drunk it, it could have been extremely dangerous, and everyone in the kitchen, including the hidden staff watching nervously, felt the tension snap like a thunderclap, and Vivienne's face paled as the betrayal and the potential consequences of her plan became visible to her own eyes, and Alexander took the cup gently from Naomi and poured it into a separate container to examine later. His respect for her growing tenfold in that moment, and he turned to Vivienne with a calm authority that sent chills down her spine, and said, "I cannot believe you would do this," and Vivienne tried to smile, but it was weak and unconvincing, and Naomi stepped back slightly, feeling the rush of adrenaline fade into a quiet satisfaction, because her courage and observant nature had prevented a disaster, and Alexander placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and said, "You saved more than my life, Naomi." Saved the truth and justice, and Vivienne's plan had been exposed in front of everyone, and Alexander whispered quietly to Naomi that her wisdom and bravery would never be forgotten, and she felt a warm pride bloom inside her as she realized the power of standing firm even when underestimated, and the staff began murmuring quietly among themselves about her courage, and Alexander decided to confront Vivienne properly later with all evidence in hand, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Anticipation of the fallout, and Naomi, feeling her intuition validated and her purpose fulfilled, glanced at the door and thought about the viewers watching this story unfold, and softly added, "Please, make sure you subscribe to see how justice will finally take its course, and comment to share your thoughts, because Naomi's bravery deserves to be celebrated and the truth deserves to be seen." Naomi Brooks stood tall in the lavish living room as Alexander King called the staff together, her heart steady and mind clear, knowing that the moment for truth had finally arrived, and Vivienne King attempted to maintain her composure. But the icy dread in her eyes betrayed her as Alexander revealed the cup incident to everyone present, explaining calmly that Naomi's sharp observation and courage had prevented a potentially catastrophic outcome, and the staff gasped quietly, some murmuring among themselves about the quiet strength of a woman they had long underestimated, while others, who had previously whispered judgments, now looked at her with awe and respect, and Naomi felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her intuition and morality had triumphed over ignorance and malice, and Alexander then addressed Vivienne directly, his voice firm but composed, stating that trust is earned through honesty, not manipulation, and that her actions had endangered not only him, but the entire household, and Vivienne's elegant facade cracked as she tried to defend herself, claiming it was a misunderstanding. Yet her lies were transparent to everyone present, and Alexander produced the evidence Naomi had carefully collected, placing the cup on the polished table, and explained that no one should ever underestimate the power of observation, integrity, and courage. especially from those society tends to overlook, and the tension in the room was thick, like a storm about to break, as Vivienne's plan unraveled completely and Naomi, standing quietly yet confidently, watched as justice began to unfold before her eyes, seeing the relief and gratitude in Alexander's expression and the humbled acknowledgement from staff who had ignored her before, and in that moment. She realized how often courage is silent, but transformative, and Alexander made it clear to Vivienne that her influence over him had ended, that respect cannot be demanded through fear or deceit, and that the household now recognized Naomi's unwavering moral compass as a standard for everyone to follow, and Vivienne, for the first time, understood the consequences of cruelty and prejudice. The silent but potent lesson that power cannot shield wrongdoing, and that true respect is earned through integrity and empathy, and Naomi gently reminded Alexander that while this chapter ended in victory, the greater lesson was for everyone to see and internalize, that discrimination, manipulation, and underestimation of anyone based on race, status, or assumptions only lead to downfall, and she glanced at the room filled with staff and guests who were silently absorbing this message, and then at Alexander, who nodded in deep agreement. And Naomi knew that her strength and courage had not only saved lives, but also set a precedent for justice and fairness within the home. And she softly thought about all viewers witnessing this story and added, please remember to subscribe for more stories of courage and justice, and comment below to share your thoughts and support those who stand strong when the world doubts them. And let this story be a reminder that integrity, intuition, and bravery can challenge any injustice, no matter how deeply hidden it is, and that even the smallest voice can create the largest impact, and that every act of honesty and courage plants the seed for respect, equality, and true change in society.